everyone for joining at 8:30 or wherever it may be, whatever time it may be where you are. I think you can still see my shared screen, right? The purple slide. Okay, so we had, as I mentioned, we had one cancellation and one addition. So this is just the updated list of speakers, but for the 3 of you that are on the call, nothing has changed. So we'll stick with the roughly 15 minutes for presenter, and we can save the questions for a common period at the end. As we just discussed, you can feel free to just message your questions to me, and then we can go through them at the end. So we'll go through in the order on the screen. So first we'll start with Professor Das, who will present testing the goodness of organizational citizenship behavior measures in the banking sector, the development of a scale in the Indian context. So I will,
thank you.
I will unshare and you can reshare. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Hey, yeah. Screen share, screen share.
Shannon,
just a minute.
Shannon, just so you know, I still have the ability to pause and stop the recording.
Okay, is it visible now?
Use it with judgment.
Is it visible now?
I won't touch it yet.
Okay, nice. I'm Das, Dr. S. Das, Professor of OBHR, Faculty of Commerce, Banaras University, India. So the topic which I plan to discuss today, the testing of goodness of citizenship behavior, measures in banking sector, development of a scale in Indian context. I think it's a very relevant topic in the sense evergreen topic, you can say, like this pandemic. It's the voluntary behavior. It's one of the great contexts now. 2 types of behavior, basically, one employee has to perform in-role behavior and extra-role behavior. So in-role behavior as per the job terms and condition, but extra-role behavior is not as per the terms and condition, which is to be done voluntarily. So initially we have to clear exactly OCB, organizational citizenship behavior. Before starting my presentation, I would like to clear this thing. It is one of the outcome of the funded project of University Grants Commission of India. They have given me fund for conducting this research for 2 years. Already I have finished this work. Now I'm presenting paper, some of paper in different universities. As I told that OCB, organizational citizenship behavior, which is called as the extra role behavior, which is also called as the voluntary behavior, helping others, conscientious towards the work environment, communicating new and critical informations. OCB has the 5 different dimensions. One has to be clear since globally it is observed that first dimensions, which is called as the altruism. Altruism is nothing that is helping others in, if somebody has some specific problems. Courtesy is also one more things preventing work-related problems. Conscientiousness exceeding the minimum role requirement of the organizations. Sportsmanship, work without complaining attitudes. That means you are not supposed to make any kind of complaint at any point of time. Civic virtue, active attention while you are doing your work. So that is exactly the sense of organizational citizenship behavior. In fact, that is the 5 different dimensions, as I told: altruism, courtesy, conscientiousness, sportsmanship, and civic virtue. Now see, there are prime notion. Basically, my work is to identify the scale or measure, which is the initial part of any kind of research. Although there are a good number of research on that particular field, some of good measures already developed by Western context. As I told, in Latin America initially, it is, North America it is initially developed, now see in Eastern culture, we don't have any specific measures. Since the measure is culture centric, that is very important. So my intention is that, club the Western and Eastern measures and prepare the new skills for India. So OCB dimension, cultural context is very important, and also the very important perception of culture. Eastern culture, people is different from Western culture. That is various notions. In India also, we have different types of research as far as OCB research is concerned. We have not yet developed kind of construct, newly construct, which has already been developed by Western people. Simply, we are adopting this particular construct in Indian context. And some of Indian authors, like as Singh and Kolekar and the NITA 2013, they have developed, modified the Western skills. But we don't have exact scale which is originated in India. Now see our view of Indian banking sector, that is very interesting. See now we have used NPA, non-performing assets. Banking fraud is also increasing day by day. We have leading frauds, a good number of frauds, and we don't have the more infrastructure facilities. That is also one of the great things. Is a challenge for Indian banking sector. So to curb this kind of situation, non-performing assets, reducing non-performing assets. So the behavior of employees, that is very important. That conducive behavior is very much expected. Rising banking frauds is also one of the great context. I think you have a good number of examples, Nirav Modi and other people, thousands of crore rupees they did some kind of frauds and they fled away from India. Some other parts of the country, they have taken the political asylum and other things. But we have still opportunities like as peer-to-peer lending, artificial intelligence, reducing the transaction cost, and targeting markets of the bottom of the pyramid. These are all the some of opportunities we have. We can develop, we can use artificial intelligence, we can have peer-to-peer lending so that we can reduce the transaction cost. And these are all some of opportunities. Now, what is the sense of this study? Why I am in this study, basically, as I told that cooperation, spontaneous behavior, organizational spontaneity, these are all the some of synonyms of organizational citizenship behavior. But organizational citizenship behavior has some specific meaning. Specific meaning is, so what should be the measures? What should be the banking sector? That is my intention to conduct this study. Now, it's very important things why we are supposed to do the research on organizational citizenship behavior. It is well known that it has superior performance, it has great organizational effectiveness, increasing efficiency, work-related employee behavior like a job satisfaction, and some develop the specific measures for banking sectors, OCB measures for banking sectors. Good number of measures are there. I am not new man doing research in this particular field. Like as Podeskov and others, 1990, they have developed 5 hidden skills. Dennis Organ in 1988, he has also developed one of the great skills. Smith and others, Organ, Podeskov, Farr and others. Farr and others, it is one of the skill developed in China, which is in my research also I introduced the Farr and others skill as well as Organ skills. And Indian context also, some of people, as I told, that we don't have any specific skill. It is exactly the modification of the Western skills, like as Krishnan and Singh and the Baral and Bhargav and the Bhargav and Baral, Kumar and Shah, Chaitanya and Tripathi and other people. Now, global research, good number of research are there. We are not much bother about it, seeing 524. It is maximum people they have used the Podascope scale, either organ scales or PAR and other scales. Now see, since it is the skill development, the issue is the skills development, some of the initial part of the research, then population of the study, which is very much specific, managerial, non-managerial employees of public and private sector banks, basically in Varanasi district, that is one of the spiritual city of India, UP province of India. Sampling which I adopted, basically stratified random sampling. Stratified random sampling is very important since we have the different category of employees. Citizenship behavior of different group of employees are different. Sampling frame is the 4:1 in between managerial, non-managerial employees. Managerial means actually cadre employees, non-managerial means some of subordinate staffs and the assistant category of staffs. On the basis of rank employee, that is very important in terms of number of employees. Now see, this is my sampling structure. You know, as I told that public and private sector, its composition is 4:1, and managerial and assistant people, that is almost equal. That is overall 350 people have been asked this particular questionnaire sampling distribution. We did some pilot study and that has been modified. Some of, as I told, I have not I have not developed any kind of new item in the existing skills. We have borrowed the scale from Podascope, organ, and the FAST, and we just mix Western scale in Indian context. Attitude scale, 5-point scales. For scale development, there's Cohen and Sudhir has also given some of idea, basically how to conceptualize, how to item analyze and everything. Sharp 1980 also 4 stages, namely identification of construct, item generation, scale development. These are the things we have used. Now see, what is very important in this research, particular research, we have 2 types of scales, Podascope scales, 24 item scales, and the Eastern scales. And Eastern scales, we have identified that 2 different design. That is very interesting. Say, scale development is not much easy. So it has some steps. What are the steps I have applied? Basically, initially we developed the internal inconsistencies. Second part, exploratory factor analysis. Then common method variance, that is the Harman one-factor test. Common exploratory factor analysis basically adopt to identify the exact dimensionality of the scales. Harman one-factor test is very important in this case, since if I ask somebody that what's your opinion about your superior, people may not give the proper response. So in what we need basically, that answer should not be loop-sided. To avoid the loop side, there is one kind of test that is called the Harman one-factor test. If we ask the question 2 different sets of questions, superior as well as the subordinates, that cases Harman factor test is not required. But we are asking the same group of people. Convergent validity, discriminant validity, that is very common here, and others, Campbell and Popper's. This is used basically, there is a 5 different steps which is used. Ultimately, we'll be doing exactly Western scale, Eastern scale, and this mixture is most welcome in Indian context. Now see, what are the measures I am using? I have used basically in this particular research. Western scales, altruism, which is very, we are helping others without any consideration. Courtesy, that is the five different items, altruism, 5 different items, and sportsmanship is very important, working without any complaint. There is sportsmanship, 5 different items, and conscientiousness, we have also identified the 5 different items. Ultimately, civic virtue, it is very important. And ultimately, we have identified the 31 items from Pinity Sword that is borrowed from that is the FAR and others from China, that is the Eastern scales. As I told, we have this is very important in Indian context, since sometimes in office we are using the official resource for our personal harmony. It is very important. Sometimes we are using illicit practice to seek personal influence and gain. These are the reverse scales, which I borrowed from FAR. Now see data analysis, as I told, that is the different steps we have applied. Now reliability, initially we have seen that is a 0.825, that is very good. Internal consistency of 31 items. Now exploitative factor analysis, we have identified, we have grouped the entire scales, entire items into 6 different groups. Harmony and resources, it is regrouped now. Harmony and resources basically the Eastern scale. Conscientiousness, that is Western scale. Civic virtue, Western scales. Heartsease, Western scale. Altruism, Western scale. Sportsmanship, Western scales. That is exploitative factor analysis. Yes, please. I am only 1 minute.
I just, yeah. I mean, you
now
can go a little bit.
Single
but.
factor test is very important. That our push. Okay, then convergent validity we have seen, that is the others is loaded in particular fact should not be 0 or 1, and we have tested it through the correlation techniques. Findings is very important here. That is the Western sportsmanship is not fit for India. That is very interesting thing. Scale development is unique. Western ethics scale is Western scale. Eastern scale, that is the ME scales. We have clubbed both the things. Ultimately, we identified the 5 factors comprising 27 items out of 31 items. So that is very unique finding. 37 items is very important for India. Now, modified OCT scales 27 items, that is rearranged. Harmony and resources, altruism. Now drawbacks of the study is very important. Now see, we have used only the 2 different measures, Podescope and the FAR and others. But we need to see the more other skills. Discriminant and the discriminant, convergent discriminant validities has been done using the within factor analysis intercorrelations only. And studies the cross-sectional. We have asked only one time respondent. It is not the longitudinal study. That is also one of the important things. But what to do more? There is the to be conducted so that one practical implication, that is UC makers can further research. As I told,
Okay, you've now got muted. I don't know if that was an intentional abrupt end. I think maybe I have a poor connection.
No, I think we don't see the slides either.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you, Professor Das. I think we can maybe come back to discuss in the question period. Okay, so we'll now hear from Kim, who is a PhD student at Korea University Business School. So Kim will present the effect of task interdependence and job autonomy on job crafting.
I'll start. Yeah. Can you see now? Okay. Hello, my name is Jihae Kim. I'm from Korea University. Today, I'm going to talk about job crafting, and the title is Effects of Task Interdependence and Job Autonomy on Job Crafting. First of all, I would like to talk about the motivation that why I investigated about job crafting. Nowadays, people worry that how can I find a job I like or how can I work happily? But in this point, we need to change our perspective on what I like. In other words, we should enjoy what I am doing rather than trying to find what I like. Then how can we enjoy the work? I think it is possible through job crafting. I will explain the concept of job crafting in details later. In general, jobs are designed by the organizations, the needs of organizations, but we think it can be redesigned in a proactive manner by the needs of an individual or team. Traditionally, organizations use the top-down approach. Top-down approach means that organization gives tasks to employees, but bottom-up approach means that employees change the task on its own. This behavior reflects changes in environments. According to Rezhnevsky and Dutton, the concept of job crafting is for employees to change the boundaries of task, psychological cognition, and social interaction. Through job crafting, it is possible to improve intrinsic motivation and performance. Job crafting can be seen as a specific type of proactive behavior, but it is different from leading behavior. Individual proactive behavior is intended to achieve the goal of organizational performance or organizational efficiency. However, there is a difference in that job crafting is primarily aimed at renewing the meaning of work through person job fit. There are some prior studies as an outcomes of job crafting. There are job commitment, job satisfaction, job efficiency, and turnover. And the antecedents of job crafting are self-efficiency, proactive personality, and so on. Next part is theory. The starting point of job crafting is job characteristic model. Hangman and Oldham acknowledged the limitations of job characteristic theory. In 1976, they claimed that if organization offered a job which has 5 key characteristics, and they thought that organizations thought that it will improve motivation and job satisfaction of employees. But later, 2010, they realized that it is impossible to design a job optimized for each individual. So they suggest and they realize a need for bottom-up method. Job crafting theory emerged as an alternative new perspective on the redesign of job at the individual level. Changing task boundaries means that physical change, such as number, form, and scope of task. Changing job-related boundaries are interaction or changing the interaction or relationship with other coworkers. And changing cognitive boundaries means changing the way in which to look at task in whole or in part. In other words, the way you think about the job, about the work, is to make cognitive changes. Teams and Becker describe the job crafting concept of job demands and resources model. Job demands are the characteristics such as cost and require physical things. In contrast, job resources means reduce job requirement, so it is used to achieve the task goals. This is the hypothesis model, and I will explain more. First hypothesis is that task interdependence will have a positive effect on job crafting. The result of prior studies on impact of interdependence on job crafting are mostly negative, because they thought that higher task interdependence will create more constraints on job. But we predict the opposite. We thought that task interdependence can act as a positive factor for job crafting in South Korea, because we thought that it will improve the ways to solve the problems through cooperation, because South Korean employees have a one team spirit. So we predict that it will have a positive, opposite result. And the second hypothesis is that job autonomy will have a positive effect on job crafting. There is an argument that employee must be fully aware of opportunity in order to do job crafting. So we predict that job autonomy will have positive relationship with job crafting, because job autonomy will affect how members perform tasks beyond completing a given task and with discretion they have. And last hypothesis is that team cohesion's mediation effect between task interdependence and job crafting. The concept of team cohesion is the extent to which the members are emotionally attached to each other. If employees have higher cohesion, and it will increase the understanding of team members, so it will make them want to stay in the team. And if employees have more social ties, and there is a high possibility they have more likely to engage in job crafting, because they want to stay in the same team and they want to work with the same members. So we predict that task interdependence affects job crafting by using team cohesion as a mediator, which can be seen as one of social and psychological characteristics. And methods part, we conducted the survey from the 30 largest company in South Korea, and total employees numbers were 529. To verify the hypothesis, we use multiple linear regression analysis, and we follow the Barrow and Kenny's mediation analysis. And these are the variable measurement. Dependent variable is job crafting, and we just verified two parts: changing boundaries of task and interaction, and we excluded the changing the cognition part, because we thought that change the perception part is very passive, so it is hard to change by our willing. So we just included the changing the boundaries of task and interaction. And we use there is an independent variables are task interdependence, and we just use flow pattern related one item. And to measure the job autonomy, we use creativity and independence related 6 items. And there are also control variables, and our control variables are gender, age, position, and education. As you can see in the table 1, job crafting had a positive relationship with other main variables. Yep. And hierarchical regression analysis part is, as you can see in model 2 and model 3, task interdependence and job autonomy had a positive relationship with job crafting. Especially job autonomy have more strong positive relationship with job crafting than task interdependence. And we conducted the mediation analysis and bootstrapping, and team cohesion had the mediation effect on between task interdependence and job crafting. And last part, discussion and future research. This study begin with a research question about whether job crafting would have a positive relationship with task interdependence in South Korea's big company. So through this result, my hypothesis or hypotheses were adopted. So through this result, when we work at company, rather than focusing solely on managing individuals effectively, managers or organizations should provide opportunity for employees to make active change on their own. And for the future research, we need more accurate measurement for job crafting, because as I mentioned before, we did not include changing the cognition part. So we need accuracy of changing crafting measurement. And lastly, we need additional analysis of various factors affecting job crafting, such as environment or context of organization. Nowadays, working condition is changing very fastly, so job crafting has a very important meaning for nowadays employees. When we work at home, we should really think about the meaning of work and change the way, or think about the meaning of work is so important. So we thought that the job crafting study is needed more and more. Yeah. This is the end of the presentation, and okay, I will stop the sharing.
Great, thank you, Kim. That was really interesting. I learned a lot. So I think we don't have our third presenter on the call. If it's all right, we'll just proceed to Kelly's
Thank you, Kim.
presentation.
Very nice presentation.
Thank you. Actually, I couldn't hear your guys' voice well. So if important notice, please write down the chat. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
We'll-
Shannon,
we'll
our
do that.
questions, we bring up our questions for everybody at the end. Is that the plan?
Yes,
Okay,
but
sure,
if you
no
if you
problem.
want to not lose
After
them,
completing presentation, we can raise some questions.
Yes.
but if you want, you can type them if you want to me, and I'll just keep track, so you don't need to like, yeah. So, okay, yeah, so if it's all right, next we'll hear from Kelly, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Guelph. So Kelly will present a shortage of talent or a shortage of commitment to workers, types of staffing strategies among small Canadian employers. Oh, Kelly, I think, Kelly, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, great.
Okay. I have a very weird slide screen. I don't know. Is it functioning better now than it was? Can you see my full screen?
So the full screen is still a bad idea, at least for me, because I don't know, it's not, yeah, it's too,
I'll carry on.
but this right now is good.
Okay, I'll carry on with that. So I'd like to start. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Kelly MacDonald and I represent a team of 4 people. You can see James Chowhan from York, Gord Cooke from Memorial in Newfoundland, and Sara Mann from the University of Guelph. All of these are in Canada. A quick overview. I'm going to look at the purpose, a very brief selected lit review, my methodology, model, results, and discussion. So if I start with looking at the purpose, first of all, the purpose of the presentation is to explore the prevalence of 4 talent management strategies among small organizations. And so what we've done is we've created a typology to summarize the approaches these small companies take in response to their hiring needs. So the typology is presented in a 2-way matrix that will illustrate our classifications. And I'll just clarify why we look at organizations between 11 and 99. In previous research, we've seen that these are distinct organization, organizational size in Canada, in Ontario in particular, the previous research. On one hand, we exclude very small organizations because they have less than 10 employees and they operate without formalized HRM policies. On the larger end, going beyond 99 employees gives us companies who have many resources to be able to implement high-level HRM policies. So we're looking at this exclusive group in the middle. And from a public policy perspective, economic and employment vibrancy depends strongly on small business. In Canada, small business represents 41.7% of gross domestic product. So it's a very significant piece of the pie. And small business performance very much depends on employees' skills and their performance. So there's the importance of what we're looking at. So on a brief lit review, globalization, deregulation, tech advances, increasing competition and weakened unions create multiple complex challenges for employers. And Osterman, our first reference, suggested that one of the ways organizations can increase the performance is to enhance their staffing in organizations. He went as far to say that HR resources of a firm could be one of the few sources of sustainable competitive advantage. And so recognizing that, the next step is to decide on which skills and ability that companies, that organization's workforce actually needs. And point 3 from Capelli suggested there are 2 ways to acquire talent. They can buy it through hiring applicants who already have required skill sets, or they can develop it through training in-house or outside of house. And in a potent example of how strategy is tied to recruitment, the decision to buy or develop talent is tied to the corporate strategy of whether to compete on cost and minimize labor costs and other input costs, or on the basis of quality and differentiation, which requires a totally different, a more agile, skilled, adaptive workforce. So if I move to the next slide, our methodology looked at a survey of 2,900 employers in Southwestern Ontario. And this survey is conducted annually by what are called workplace planning boards. And they are government agencies that work with employers on local labor issues and employment issues. And they're very regionally focused. So the issues obviously are different in different areas. And if we look at a map of Ontario on my next slide, you can see that for those of you who aren't aware, this is a large rural, there are large cities up here, but it's very rural and very less densely populated than Southern Ontario tends to be, this channel all along here. So the group of so there's workplace planning boards in every one of these regions, and they work with the local employers and people, the applicants for those jobs. So in our study, we're looking at the 9 planning boards in this area. And that area is a very densely populated with a diverse economy, and participating organizations come from almost every sector of the industry: construction, education, social services, healthcare. And these are voluntary participation. So these companies go on and utilize this survey and answer this survey voluntarily. So, and it has such a good cross-section. It results in such a good cross-section. So if we look at our model, the first thing in establishing the typology, we have on the left side, it answers the question, how do you find the quality of applicants in the marketplace? And the employer can answer poor to fair, or they can answer good to excellent. They can answer poor, fair, good, excellent, and we've lumped them in 2 categories. So poor to fair and good to excellent are lumped into 2 categories. And at the top, across the top, does the employer support employee training? It's a dichotomous choice of yes or no. So from that, we get 4 typologies inside the box. So Reliance, find the quality of applicants poor to fair, and they don't support training. Developers, find the applicants poor to fair, but they do provide training. Poachers, find applicants good to excellent, and they do not support training. And refiners, find employees good to excellent, but they do support training. So if we look at keeping that typology in mind, let's look at the output that came from this division by typology. So I'm going to start with first looking at, okay, first I'll describe the chart. If you look down the left slide, you see the different types, the 4 typology, and this column, the second column, it just reminds you who is in that typology. Do they provide training, and are they finding quality workers? So if we look down 2018 to start, what we see is that 10.3% are Reliance. These are the people that find low quality applicants and they do not provide training. 54.8% find the quality of applicants to be low and they do support training. You can see in the second box. We're going down 2018 still. 3.2% have no training and they find higher quality of workers in the applicant pool. And in refiners, 31.7% find higher quality workers and they do provide training. What's important about this is there are some general observations in just looking at what this is. And here's where the employers who participate gain access to this profile. In the top 2 boxes, you'll note the Reliance and developers make up 65.1% of small employers. And that group of people are finding applicants poor to fair. And if you think about it, that's a significant policy issue. It suggests a poor match between skills in the marketplace and what employers need. And more significantly, if you look at its amount in 2015, it was 58.1%, and it's grown to 65.1%. So the number of companies who find poor quality workers in the marketplace when they go seek to hire is growing, not a good indicator. So the second observation to make, if we look at reliance and poachers, so the first and the third box in 2018, it indicates that 13.5% of employers don't offer training. And that's a significant problem for small businesses. They haven't got the resources and need external support for training. The third point I would suggest comes out of this is from a policy perspective. We want refiners, that's the bottom category where they provide training and they're finding higher quality workers. We want that category to be a big and growing category. That would indicate health in the employment market. It is indicative of employers who are getting what they need. It's employees who are learning new skills and growing with them as the market demands grow. And it also indicates a balanced marketplace with a match between applicants and employer needs. Instead, we see that refiners represent only a third of the marketplace, which isn't a good indicator. And it's declining. If you look at it in 2015, refiners represented 37%. It now represents 31%. So not a good direction for this to go in. And if we look at the groups the fourth observation, the groups that find quality applicants, which is poachers and refiners, represented 41.9% of the market in 2015, and now represents 34.9% of the market. So a declining group of people who are finding high quality workers in the workplace. Not a good barometer for what's happening in the marketplace. The second set of results we look at, this is the same typology, just to keep you on track here. You'll see the quality of applicants down the left and the employer supports training across the top. So what we see inside now, though, is small companies and large companies. So we just do a quick comparison to say, how do these small companies compare to the large companies? So if we look at 10% of small companies are finding applicants poor to fair. Only 3% of large companies are finding poor to fair. And if we look down this column of employers don't support training, we see 13% of small businesses don't support training. That's 10 plus 3 versus 3% of large employers. So you see the opportunity that large employers have over small employers to create internal training. It's also worth it to note that 65% of small businesses, that's the reliance and developers, find applicants poor to fair. So if you look at this 10% and the 55%, that's small businesses who find applicants poor to fair. Look at the large businesses, 3% plus 59% is still 63%. And it tells you that those numbers are so close that they indicate, regardless of the size of organizations, that problem of low-level applicants persists in the marketplace. An important consideration for policymakers and employers alike, and especially the workplace planning boards. So my next slide, I'm having trouble changing my slide all of a sudden. There it is. The third set of outcomes. How am I doing for time, Shannon?
You have about 2.5 minutes.
Uh-oh, I better go quickly because my
okay.
fourth slide is of critical importance. I'll go quickly through this one. Smaller organizations planning to hire, we're at 77%. Those experiencing separations said yes, 77%. Smaller organizations who provide training, 86%, and that's been consistent over the years. It's not growing, it's not declining. Quality of available workers, poor to fair, we've discussed that. The important factor here to bring up is quality of applicants is tied to a question in the survey where they were asked, are there positions that are hard to fill? Now it's obvious that that's going to be a yes answer to anybody who's finding hard applicants of poor outcomes. So if we look now at the final descriptive statistics, this is the really telling slide that I'd like to look at. First, if we look about reliance and developers, those are the people who are finding poor applicants in the market. They have above average hiring and above average separations. That's indicative of people with fewer skill sets moving through the workplace, experiencing higher separations and disrupted work histories. And if this category makes up 65% of small businesses, they have higher than average separation rates. And if the average turnover costs $18,000 per employee, this is a significant factor for small businesses. Encouragingly, 77% plan to hire. But there's also an indication of stability here. If you look at poachers and refiners in the hard to fill positions, poachers and refiners are very low in finding hard to fill positions. They're also below average hiring, below average separation. It indicates a certain stability, but if we note it's only in 35% of employers, we need that number to be growing. And the final statistic I wanted to bring out is if we look at reliance and developers again, we see that they are finding hard to fill positions at a very high rate compared to these people. These other people who don't have trouble finding good employees. What's illuminating about this question is they go further to answer the question of why are you finding hard to fill? And one of the answers, the first 4 answers they choose, not enough applicants. Now the region has a 6.1% unemployment rate, that's prior COVID, which is slightly higher than Canada's average overall. And on a large population base, there should be enough applicants out there. So that brings out the first question. The second reason they found hard to fill positions, lack of work experience. The third, lack of education and credentials. The fourth, lack of technological skills. It's important to note that all of these are important but addressable items if we can get into the marketplace and make change. So we identify in this a disparity between what organizations need and what they find as they seek employees. And clearly there's an opportunity for public policy and education, trade institutions to potentially address the causes behind these numbers that optimize the match between applicants and employers who seek to hire them. But it is important to recognize that in rapidly evolving markets, there's bound to be a structural lag between recognizing and addressing the needs of employers. That is, in recognizing that employers need these skills and manifesting those skills in the workplace there's a bit of a structural lag in that. So thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think I'm the last person, so I'll stop sharing my screen first of all.
Awesome, thank you.
And I'll turn off my microphone.
So I didn't see, unless I missed, but I didn't see any questions come in the private chat. So everybody can feel free to just, I guess you can use the hand raising function or just like maybe speak your question or type it in the chat. Emma?
I do have a question. So first of all, thank you for the presentations. My question is for Kelly. Can you kindly make a comment on the complexity of the recruitment processes of the organizations that you examined, and how do they correlate to how they're finding the quality of candidates? And also maybe the performance of those firms?
It would be interesting to know all of those things, Emma. I do recognize that this data that comes out has proven to be very robust over the years. And the group of organizations that participate tends to be quite consistent. But ongoing, numerous organizations participate as well. And so as far as complexity, you can recognize the difficulty in taking these cross-sector organizations and their difference in complexity. For instance, a transportation company versus a healthcare company might be very different structurally. And mostly what this looks at is it identifies the existence of an issue in the marketplace, and it requests a deeper look at what drives these decisions. And that would have to be by sector. Did that address your question? Thank you. Professor Dubs. Shannon, will you mediate this?
Yes, there's
Okay.
2 people. So I think maybe Kim, do you want to go ahead, and then Professor Das, I think, also had his hand up.
Yeah, I just wonder if the organization has considered the ever-changing relationship between employees that it wants the organization wants and the organizations.
Would you rephrase that for me, Kim? The end of it, I didn't quite.
Would you consider? I can hear you now well. So
I hear you perfectly.
did you consider the ever? You can hear me. Right? Did you consider the ever-changing relationship between employees and organization?
Oh, that would be definitely a mediating factor, Kim. I would totally agree with that. If you look at, this is a very rudimentary data set that already exists in the market. And as time goes on, they do expand the questions asked in the data set, and they get deeper and more and richer as a result. But at this point, that doesn't come out in this data. Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question, Kim?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Professor Das, I think you also had your hand up. You will need to unmute yourself.
Hello. Are you listening my voice?
Yes.
Is it audible now? Now see, your model is quite okay. Now see, how do you validate your model? Is there any techniques you have developed that is validation of your model?
That will come in future research. That is part of the plan for what we're initiating. And we're also looking at doing qualitative research with the companies that turn out to be particularly successful at matching employees and training.
Okay, thank you.
I see another question in the chat for Kelly. So very interesting presentation. Do you have more information about how employers support employee training?
It's a very general question. I'm glad you asked that. It's a very general question because when I first looked at it, I was looking and said, what is training? And training, separate from orientation, is the only distinction they make on this parameter in the data. So they say, if you're a food service worker, perhaps you learn how to do the cash and the till. That would be separate from the training that you might get if you go outside and learn how to customer service training. So that's the only distinction this data makes. It's very rudimentary data. And as you can imagine, the workplace planning boards count on organizations to participate voluntarily online in this survey. And so it's a trade-off between going deeper and losing participation. So as is any research, I guess. I have a couple of questions, one for Kim and one for Professor Das, if everybody's finished with
Yes,
questions.
yes, please.
Okay, so I'll start with Professor Das.
Yes.
I liked your presentation. It enveloped Western and Eastern scales. And in the end, did you combine and create a scale that worked across Western and Eastern? Or did you create a straightforward scale for Eastern cultures?
Now see, Eastern culture and as the scale or measures, it is purely dependent on the culture. Sir, Western culture is purely different from Eastern culture. So like as Farr and others, 1997, they have developed one scale for measuring organizational citizenship behavior in China. That is company resource and interpersonal relationship, which is exactly silent in Western measures. Western people, they are not misusing their time during office hours, but in Eastern people, they are doing. So there is some mismatch in between Western and Eastern. So that because of culture, Eastern, Western are different. So that we need the specific culture-centric scale. This is my intention.
Very good, thank you. Thank you, that answered my question. And Kim, I wanted to ask you a question I wrote this down, first of all. I have two questions. One is, how does working at home, is that potential research for job crafting for future looks at what happens when we all go home? And the second question, I wanted to ask why you predicted that task interdependence had a positive versus negative effect despite the research on job crafting. And you indicated it was a Korean context and that's why it was different. And I was curious why.
I will answer the second question first. We predict the opposite perspective, the previous research, as we concentrate on Korean cultures, Korean companies' cultures, because Korean employees have a corporationship. It is such as one team spirit. So when we work together, we focusing on the teams and corporations. So when we think about the corporations, people think it will have a more, it will have higher performance, and many managers focusing on that. So we predict that opposite hypothesis. So, and these Korean cultures reflects the Korean's environment. So I think so the result was positive. And your first question is the changing of work at home.
Yes, and how does that affect job crafting? And I know that's not your research, but I wonder, that would be interesting research, and where could that go? And maybe that's not a fair question because you haven't had a chance to think about it, but it just fascinated me, the idea of all of a sudden all of us are at home, and what does that do to the concept of job crafting? If you want to answer it, if you're not ready to, I understand.
As I mentioned before, when we work at home, we have more time to think about the meaning of work, and we have more opportunity to renewing the meaning of work. So I think when we work at home, we can concentrate well, and work area is likely to expand. So because we can spend all time to my work, so I think it will have positive portion, but of course inconvenient to work at home because co-working is hard and difficult to make a higher performance. But nowadays working condition is changing, so if we work at home, our work area will be expand and more interesting when we changing the way and think about the work. Yeah.
Great. So Professor Das, you have a question for Kim? Oh, sorry, I'm not able to hear you. I'm not sure if others can. You are unmuted, but I don't know, I don't hear anything. Perhaps you could type the question. Maybe that's the whole question. Kim, could you speak to the accuracy of your job
No
crafting
problem,
measure?
I think.
Oh, okay, now we can hear you. So you could go ahead if there's more. Yeah.
I can hear you, Professor Das. You.
Okay, so, well, okay. This is the, yeah. This is the working at home thing, right? So I think we can maybe understand the question to be, could you just speak to the accuracy of the job crafting measure? Although perhaps we should let him reconnect so that he could hear the answer. You want to just give a minute until he comes back on, or?
I don't understand his meaning or question.
We can maybe let him clarify.
Accuracy, I just want, as I mentioned before, job crafting's measurement is very difficult because, as I mentioned before, there are three parts to changing, but changing the boundaries of task and interaction is more easier than measure the changing the cognitive part, because changing the willingness is passive and hard to change as one thing. In other words, when we want to change my mind, but it is difficult to change my mind and my cognitive things. So I told that it is difficult to measure the accurate job crafting's concept. Because in this research, we did not include the changing the cognitive part. So, but some research suggested we should include the cognition part, changing the cognition part, but I do not agree with that. So we excluded that. So for the future research, if we include the cognition part, if we include that part, we will measure the accurate meaning of. We will measure the accurate meaning of job crafting. So, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for any of the speakers? Okay, so if not, maybe I'll ask a question. So this is a question for Kim. I have attempted to type it out, but I'll try to just ask it first. So I was just wondering if you are able to distinguish the effect of task interdependence on its own or via team cohesion, distinguish that effect on job crafting from the reverse where job crafting could impact team cohesion. So in the, like if you, and so maybe it's, I'm not fully understanding the context, so maybe it's obvious that it can only go in one way. But I'm wondering if you have changes to your like job related relationships with your coworkers, which would fall under job crafting, I believe, could that then lead to more team cohesion? Like, do you have a concern of sort of the relationship going the other way, or in the way that you identified, is that not a concern? So I'll paste a version of that question.
Can you hear me? Yeah. As your question, I agree that there is a reverse causality, and because people wait to try to get closer to the person who he or she wants. So when we think team cohesion effect on task interdependence, you mentioned your question is that team cohesion have first variable and task interdependence can act as a mediate variable, right? I can hear you.
Sorry, I'm wondering if job crafting can impact, like if your dependent variable can.
I can hear say 1 minute.
Sorry, so I'm wondering if job crafting, which is your dependent variable, can actually impact the independent variable.
Job crafting can be as independent.
Or if you have a timing, like, so suppose you were measuring job crafting after the fact, right? Then you wouldn't have this concern. So I'm just not sure if maybe there's a way you're measuring it that addresses it, or if it's just, this is kind of like the correlations and this is the patterns and this is kind of, or if it's like the model that drives the interpretation. Or maybe the question doesn't make sense. It's okay.
You're right. Job crafting can be act as a independent variable, but we thought that relations between employees are the first one, and people impacted me. We predict that because I impact on others, but we focus on other employees impact on me. So we focus that. So you are right. I think, but you're right. I will check again, and I will analyze the impact of job crafting to other members of task interdependence.
I mean, like maybe there is or isn't a way to address it, right? But it could be that if you can get a different, like, you know, a before and an after, or just like measure them at different times, and you can sort of like piece that apart, right? Are there other questions for any of the presenters? Okay, I have one then for Professor Das. So I think you were speaking mostly to the like developing the construct of measuring organizational citizenship behavior. I was just wondering if after developing that construct, have you used it in the, and maybe I missed this and it was at the end, but are there any like interesting patterns that you see in the banking sector that you're looking at? Like, are there, I don't know, sub parts of banking that have higher organizational citizenship behavior by this measure, or? Do you see interesting things using your measure, I guess is the short question.
Scale of measuring organizational citizenship behavior. Now see, last sentence also Kelly that why Eastern and Western? Because culture, there is cultural deviance, culture are different. So that cases we can't blindly adopt the Western scales in Indian context or Eastern part of the country. So that cases ethic and emic scale, that is the global scale. What is the global scale of organizational citizenship behavior? And what is the culture study scale of particular country? So organ scale is well-established scale of organizational citizenship behavior. That is from America. So this scale is widely used by different organizations in India, different parts of the world. Now, some of people are opposing. This scale is not perfect for India. This scale is not perfect for China. We need to adopt, we need to modify it. So this is my endeavor, basically, is say Western scale and Eastern scale, you just mix it. Then it just have to apply in bank. So that it is not only applicable to bank, but I'm sure that that can be used in BFSI sector, banking, financial, service and insurance sector. Equally, that is equally applicable.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, I will maybe ask another then. So I have a question for Kelly. So I'm not sure if you maybe spoke to this and I missed it, but I found the patterns that you showed in, I think it was your first result slide, very interesting. So this idea that there's like, I don't know, a skill deficiency in the market in Southwestern Ontario that is increasing. I'm not sure if you have in your data the breakdown by different sectors or occupation, or if you could speak to like where is that deficiency in the market? Because you sort of spoke to like the patterns by size, but I don't know if you have that other info.
And we do have that in our data. They are broken out, but Shannon, at this time, I wouldn't be able to kind of go into it. There are, I believe, 21 industries that participate, and I may not be adequately prepared to kind of go into where those problems are. The other issue is that in doing this, we're using descriptive statistics rather than statistical analysis. And so it's indicating broader trends that need to be further identified, and industry trends will definitely be significant. If you think about it from the employers who participate, they're getting data specific to their industry is what they're all about, because the rules wouldn't apply. The same kind of applications won't apply to education that do to, say, transportation, as you can well imagine. And so doing that deeper analysis is part of some other work that we're working on. And maybe there wasn't probably enough time because there's a 21 sector analysis to come out of that. Mm-hmm. Thanks for asking that, though. It allows me to show the breadth of where this could go.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, so sorry, that was maybe not a fair question, but I think that's exactly what I was thinking, is it's just like very interesting to know, like very useful to know where those gaps are. But also perhaps, I think you said 500 and something is your sample, right? So it may not be possible to break it down into all the, you know, but I mean.
It was 1,091
Oh, okay.
small firms. And then there were large firms and smallest firms.
Yeah, so you may be able to see something by occupation or industry in the future, and I think that'd be super interesting. So that was maybe.
I definitely would see that possibility. And preliminary work has already revealed that there might be something more there. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So we have 6 minutes left. If anyone has any other questions. Or
maybe. Yes, Kelly, please, Kelly. Kelly, can I ask some questions to Kelly? Sorry, Kelly. Kim. Hello, Kim. Kim, shall I ask one questions? This audio problem. I just write the questions, please.
Yes.
Now see, you're mediation analysis. You have used the Baron and Kenny method 1986. Why you are not applying the path analysis, structural equation modeling?
Why and then what? Why
you are not using the path analysis, so-called structural equation modeling, SAM? It is the mediation analysis, but you can design the model that is so-called path analysis through structural equation modeling.
Factor analysis.
SEM.
You mean factor?
Right, structural equation modeling. You can further extend your research by using the structural equation modeling, because only mediation is not enough. That can't give you the good model. Structural equation modeling only it will give you the model, and that will be equally practical implications. Is it possible to apply the structural? Do you have any idea about SAM, structural equation modeling?
Yes. If you measure like your suggestion, I think it is more. Right. Yeah, I can measure it more accurately. But before, I actually measure the different level before this research. So I just used the same level. So I didn't use SEM. But later I will use structural equation modeling, and I will have a more accurate results. Thank you. Your suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So I think
your faculty, doctoral scholar. Kim.
I'm PhD student now.
You are student, doctoral scholar, a PhD scholar.
One more.
You are doing research. You are doing research, doctor. You are doing research.
Research.
You are research scholar.
I do not understand. Research? What?
Yes, I think the answer is yes. So Kim is a PhD student at Korea University Business School, and I think she's doing research because we're seeing it. So thanks for that question, comment. So I think I saw Renee pop up. So Renee, did you have a question? You can just ask verbally if you want.
Yes, please. It's a question for Kelly. I was wondering, it was very interesting to see the difference between labor market availability and quality of labor market availability, and then whether or not people are training. Are you using any of the literature on skill mismatch in your research?
We are not, but it doesn't mean it doesn't apply. And I definitely will take note of that and bring it to the team and see where that goes. And are you familiar with that literature?
yeah, when we talk about skill mismatch, there's a lot of things. One way to look at it could be from the labor market perspective.
Yeah.
And there's also all the question of overqualification, underqualification, and then overcompetence, undercompetence, and that's sort of interesting to see what are links to that, because training and staffing methods could be ways to deal with skill mismatch. So, and I know it's a big priority right now in the Quebec government, I guess pre-COVID, but
Yes, right.
in French we would talk about adéquation, formation, emploi. So it's a big thing. There's even a law that's done in Quebec about that. And I understand that some of the regional group you were talking, planning group, would probably be the, there's probably the equivalent in Quebec, which is a different name, but it's very interesting to see that the type of questions that are asked, and in Quebec, a lot of this is done in link with what we call adéquation, formation, emploi, which translates strangely in English to skill mismatch, because in French it's like positive and in English it's negative, but it's definitely interesting, and that's why we're very interested in hearing what you had to say about that, because we're trying to look at this and what can SMEs do in Quebec.
That's a very interesting. That's a very interesting contribution, and the perspective from the Quebec market would be fantastic to look at. Renee, what is there a way to take this kind of conversation further outside of here?
Definitely, and we'd like to do this. Our team research wanted to do this as well. So I guess I can maybe put my contact in I'll send you my contact via the chat. Do we have time to do this before it closes?
Yes, we will not close it before you guys have done it.
Thank you for that contribution.
And if you send me your address, I'd be very happy with that too. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's 10 o'clock, so the session officially ends, but we'll leave well, I hope, Tasneem, we can leave it open for a couple minutes for that email exchange. So I just want to thank everyone for joining, and that was a very interesting discussion for me, and also 3 very fascinating presentations. I learned a lot about these different areas. So yeah, thank you everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
For joining, everyone.
I plan to Canada, but there's a problem,